Alright, so in this video, I'm going to be talking about the most exciting project I've researched up until this point. And from the title of the video, you know that project is SIA. Now, if you're trading crypto back in 2017, you'll remember that SIA was one of the top performing alts of that cycle. From January of 2017 to its peak in January of 2018, Siacoin did almost a 500x. And that was driven by the fact that they had created a working decentralized cloud storage solution. But fast forward almost 4 years later, and they've created an even more ambitious project in Skynet, which is a decentralized alternative to the internet. Now, given the scale of the project that they're working on, I am super bullish on the fundamentals of Siacoin, and in this video, I'm going to be explaining where I think Siacoin is going to be going over the next 5 to 10 years. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to start by individually talking about all of the layers that make up the SIA ecosystem and how they work together to create a decentralized alternative to the internet. And then I'm going to talk about the investment thesis behind Siacoin, where I see it going this cycle, and where I see Siacoin going in the long term. So with that, let's jump right into it. So we're going to get started by taking a look at the settlement layer of the SIA ecosystem, which is the SIA blockchain itself. Now, the SIA blockchain runs on proof of work and is similar to other proof of work blockchains like Bitcoin. There are nodes on the network that process and verify transactions, and the nodes on the network are rewarded for their work with freshly minted Siacoin. The difference between Bitcoin and Siacoin, however, is that Siacoin has no supply cap. So every single year there's going to be an increase in the number of Siacoin available on the market. However, this increase isn't that dramatic. Right now, the inflation rate on the SIA network is around 4%, and as time goes on, that inflation rate is going to steadily go down. And the reason why is because the block reward from here on out is going to remain constant at 30,000 Siacoin. So while you do have to account for some level of inflation, it's predictable inflation and it doesn't create a very high hurdle rate for growth. Now, in addition to the nodes on the network processing Siacoin transactions, they're also there to process the smart file contracts that are initiated between renters and hosts on the SIA network. And that's what brings us into the first layer of the SIA ecosystem, which is the SIA network. The SIA network is a decentralized, permissionless cloud storage protocol. In contrast to the centralized data storage options we have today, like Dropbox, Google Drive, Microsoft OneDrive, and iCloud, data stored on the SIA network is stored with a distributed network of storage providers called hosts who offer up their excess storage space on their computers in return for a fee. And the people who are storing their data on the SIA network are called renters. And because the SIA network is permissionless, anybody can be a host and anybody can be a renter. Now, the price paid by a renter and the revenue earned by a host are determined in a free and open market. And it's this free market that allows SIA to offer the best rates of any cloud storage provider. Now, during 2020, the average cost of storing 1 terabyte on the SIA network came out to around $2 a month. This is in comparison with the cheapest centralized option, which was Microsoft OneDrive, which costs $7 a month. Now, currently it costs around $9 a month to store 1 terabyte on SIA network, and that's because the price of Siacoin has absolutely skyrocketed in the last few months, and the network hasn't had time to adjust. But over the long term, the cost of storing data on the SIA network is considerably lower than that of using a centralized storage provider. Now, the agreement between a host and a renter is determined by a smart contract called a SIA file contract. And to enter into a SIA file contract, hosts have to put up collateral in the form of Siacoins, which are held in escrow until the end of the contract, and this acts as a commitment to good behavior by that host. And the renters also have to put up Siacoins, which are held in escrow as a commitment to paying that host in the future. Now, upon completion of the contract, if the host has made good on their promise to store that data, then their collateral is returned to them and they're paid for the amount of storage that they gave up to store that renter's data. And the renter's coins are taken to pay that host. However, because renters want to have access to their files 100% of the time, hosts are incentivized to remain online close to 100% of the time. And if they're not able to remain online 100% of the time, then they're penalized, and if at the end of a contract a host has not made good on their promise to store that data, then their collateral is completely taken away from them and they're not paid for that contract. So that is a basic explanation of how storing data on the network works, and I could go a lot more in depth, but for the purposes of this video, I want to focus entirely on what matters for the investment thesis. So if you're interested in learning more about how the SIA network works or how Skynet works, then I've included links in the description below that will take you to the resources I use to learn more about SIA. Okay, so SIA has created a decentralized cloud storage solution, but why should anybody care? Well, the way I see it, there's 3 main reasons why people should care. The first is that it's more secure, the second is that it's censorship resistant, and the third is that it puts the control of data back into the user's hands. In terms of security, the SIA network is more secure because of the way that they store files on the network. Every time a renter adds a file to the SIA network, that file is broken up into 30 segments, encrypted, and sent to 30 different hosts across the network. Now, it only takes 10 of those segments to recreate the entire file. So even if 20 of the hosts just randomly disappeared off of the network, you'd still be able to recover your file. And on top of that, every time a host drops off of the network, SIA recreates the segment that they were holding with another host. So really the only way that you could lose your files on the SIA network is if there was some sort of global event that knocked out all of the hosts on the SIA network, which is pretty unlikely. Now, in terms of being censorship resistant and putting the ownership of the data back into the user's hand, those kind of go hand in hand. The censorship resistance comes from the fact that there's no centralized party in control of your data. The user is the only person in control of the data that they upload to the SIA network. So in this sense, you not only are the only person with the control of your data and you decide what happens to your data, but nobody can take that data away from you. Now, up until this point, all of this sounded really good to me, and I was wondering why more people aren't using SIA. And the biggest barrier to this is the fact that you need Siacoins to be able to use the SIA network. Now, for crypto people, that's not really a big problem because we all know how to go and buy Siacoins, but for regular everyday consumers, that's a pretty massive barrier, and for a lot of them, it's really not worth the risk of going and buying Siacoins in order to be able to store your data using the SIA network. So for this reason, this was a pretty big barrier that I didn't know how SIA was going to be able to overcome unless they created other payment options that immediately converted CAD or USD to Siacoin. But the consumer cloud storage market, as big as it is, isn't the thing that makes me the most bullish on Siacoins. It's the way that Skynet was built on top of the SIA network to be able to store data on the SIA network. And that's what we're going to talk about next as we jump into what Skynet is and how it works. So Skynet provides the SIA ecosystem the functionality required to become a decentralized alternative to the internet. And it does this by doubling as both a content delivery network as well as a file sharing platform. Now again, similar to when I was explaining the SIA network, there are more moving parts to Skynet than I can explain in this video, so I'm going to be focusing only on those things that are most important to understand my investment thesis. But again, if you want to learn more about Skynet and how it works, then I've included a lot of really great links in the description. And the best one, if you want to understand Skynet, is an article written by one of SIA's co-founders called A Deep Dive into Skynet. So we're going to start by taking a look at this from the user's perspective. What Skynet allows users to do is store data on the SIA network without having to worry about Siacoins or the blockchain. Now, like I said, this is one of the biggest barriers I saw to users being able to use the SIA network, which is the fact that a lot of people don't want to have to buy Siacoins in order to store data on the SIA network. Well, Skynet solves that problem because users can upload data to the SIA network through Skynet completely for free. But even more than this, Skynet allows developers to build decentralized apps on top of Skynet that are leveraging that data that is being uploaded by users on the SIA network. Now, attracting developers to build on Skynet is one of the keys to success for SIA, because they can have all this wonderful technology that works really well, but if nobody is developing anything on top of Skynet, then it really doesn't matter. But SIA has done an excellent job at attracting developers onto the platform. In just the 1 year that Skynet has been operational, there's over 180 different apps built on Skynet, some of which are Twitter, Instagram, YouTube to MP3 clones that are completely decentralized. They have over 5 million uploads and 25 million downloads on the network and over 1 million users. Now, the way that they've been able to attract so much developer activity onto their platform is because of the fact that developers don't have to pay for the server costs like they would if they were building an app on a centralized server. And the reason why is because the cost of the infrastructure that allows for Skynet to operate is completely paid for by portal operators. Now, portals and portal operators are a key piece to the Skynet puzzle. And the reason why is because they essentially act as a bridge between the SIA network and Skynet. And what they do is they serve up content for users on that portal, and they also store the data generated by users that are using that specific portal. Now, there's no end to the number of portals that can be built on top of Skynet, and each portal operator is required to run a full node of the SIA blockchain. So essentially what portals do is they take content being generated by users on that portal, they rent out space on the SIA network, which is important to note for the investment thesis that's coming up, and they also pay for the bandwidth costs for users to summon up files or data from the SIA network. Now, clearly running a public portal is a costly activity, and the way the portal operators pay for these costs is by monetizing their users. And they can monetize their users in a similar way that centralized servers monetize their users. They can charge them a subscription fee they can sell ads to them, or they can sell the data that is generated by the users on that portal. Now, it's important to note that if you don't like the monetization strategy being used by a specific portal, you don't have to access that decentralized application or that file using that portal. You can switch over to any portal that you want and access the exact same content. And this is because portals don't actually own any of the data. They just cover the costs for users and later try to monetize these users in unique ways to make it a profitable activity. But to be able to access content stored on the SIA network, you don't have to use any specific portal, you just have to use a portal. And now let's say you're a user who follows a specific content creator, and that content creator charges 1/10 of a cent for you to watch his or her video. And then on top of that, the portal operator, because they're offering such a great service and offer really great speeds, are also going to charge you another cent on top of that 1/10 of a cent that you have to pay. Well, if a certain user doesn't want to pay that additional cent, but still wants to consume that content, they can switch over to another portal that doesn't charge that cent. Maybe they'll get worse service, but they're going to pay less to be able to access that content. And this is a really key concept because it shows that the content that is stored on the SIA network is owned by the users and not by any centralized party. Alright, so that's a basic explanation of how Skynet works. But now that we know how Skynet works, why is it so much better than the internet as it is today? Well, as I see it, there's three main reasons. The first is that it's censorship resistant, the second is that it's secure, and the third is that it's easier to build an identity using Skynet than it is with the current options that we have today. So in terms of censorship resistance and insecurity, this is an extremely important problem that consumers are facing today. We're starting to question that it's a good idea to be storing such a significant portion of our data with a small minority of technology companies. And like we've seen over this past year, the problem that comes with this is that censorship is all too easy for these big players. And whether you are on the boat or off the boat in terms of censorship, it's clearly a very big problem for a central authority to be able to determine who should have a voice on a platform or not. And the second problem is that if a hacker was able to hack into Google or Facebook or Amazon, the damage that they could do is immense because they'd have access to a very large number of people's data and information. Versus something like Skynet, where a hacker would only be able to access one person's identity and information at a time. So it's clearly a lot less efficient to be a hacker using a decentralized network like Skynet compared to something like if you were able to hack Google, Facebook, or Amazon and get access to a lot of user information. Now, obviously, I know it's practically impossible to hack Google, Amazon, or Facebook, but still the problem of censorship does remain with the centralization of data. Now, the third benefit to using a decentralized alternative to the internet is that you have a single identity compared to multiple identities that you have on the internet today. And now what I mean by this is that every time that you sign up for a new account on a website or a service, you have to input your information all over again. So essentially what happens is that you have a bunch of different versions of yourself living on the internet because of the fact that you have to input data that changes all the time on new websites and services. But with Skynet, you would have one single identity, which would be your SkyID. So this will greatly simplify the identification process within the internet. Okay, so now that I've laid out my argument for why SIA network is better and why Skynet is better than alternatives, let's jump into my investment thesis. Alright, so my investment thesis behind SIA is honestly pretty simple. And I made this very simple diagram a few days ago to represent how I think that value is going to waterfall through the SIA ecosystem and end up driving demand for SIA coins, which is going to drive the price of SIA coins up. So essentially my thesis starts with the developers. Now, developers on the SIA network are incentivized to develop applications on Skynet because of the fact that they get paid every time that somebody uses that application. And on top of that, they're also incentivized to start building applications on top of Skynet rather than centralized servers because of the fact that there is no cost to developing applications on Skynet. Now, the more applications that are built on Skynet, the more users that's going to attract. And the more users that are attracted to Skynet, the more data points that they're going to create. And all of these data points need to be stored somewhere. And the portals are the ones that are going to be storing that data. So the more data that is generated by the users, the more data that the portals are going to have to store on SIA network. And the portals have to pay for that storage and for the bandwidth to be able to summon up that data using SIA coins. Because that storage is paid for in SIA coins, is going to drive up the demand for SIA coins and subsequently drive up the price. Now, something else that I want to note is that when the demand for storage space on the SIA network increases, that's also going to bring more hosts onto the network. And hosts also have to put up collateral in the form of SIA coins to be able to earn any SIA file contracts. So there's a two-sided demand for SIA coins on the SIA network, driven by both hosts and renters. Now, to get an idea of how fast this network could grow, I'm going to do two things. The first is look at legacy markets, so look at the cloud storage market as it is today, which as of today is a $50 billion market and is expected to go up to around $130 billion by 2024, which represents a CAGR of around 22-23%. So if legacy cloud storage markets are growing at 22 to 23%, and we're expecting that some of that market share is going to be taken away by SIA, then it stands to reason that the SIA network is going to grow at a rate faster than a CAGR of 22 to 30%. Now, the second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the growth in the amount of data being stored on the SIA network. And from 2019 until today, that number has grown around threefold. So we're already seeing that compared to legacy markets, the amount of data being stored on the SIA network is growing at a pace much more rapid than that of legacy markets. So it stands to reason to me that now that SIA is attracting more developers onto the platform and they have a superior product to that of legacy markets, the growth on the SIA network is going to be upwards of 40 to 50% a year. And now, because I don't like hyping up projects without any reason, I want to remain at that conservative estimate of around 40 to 50% growth on a year-over-year basis. But if Skynet is able to take away a significant amount of market share from the current legacy market, then we can be seeing growth rates upwards of 100, 200, 300% on an annualized basis. So that is my investment thesis regarding Siacoin, and is why I am very bullish on the future of Siacoin. And if we look at the speculative bubble that happened regarding SIA back in 2017, you can make a reasonable estimate that SIA, now that they have an even better product, can attract even more hype and have an even bigger bubble form in the price of SIA. So it's possible that we're going to see another bubble in the value of SIA coins. But as a long-term investment, I think SIA has an incredibly strong potential to generate 50% CAGR plus return on your investment. So that does it for this video. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing you all in my next video.